My name is Lori Power. My company is MP Benefits, and I'm a group benefit consultant. Every week, we do something with Shift. Shift now includes having a weekly discussion where we pick a topic and we talk authentically and openly about it. We do continuing education courses through Shift now, and we also do leadership masterclass workshop where we take an idea and we really work it through as peers. There's no advice given. It is all experience based on a particular topic. Very pleased that everybody could come in today, as we're going to be talking to Chris. My co-host today is Lisa Dabb, and take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa. My business is a Strong Impact Academy, and simply put, I help people be better bosses to build better cultures in their businesses, so that they can achieve their goals.
And today we're talking all things culture from the perspective of a business owner and getting to the why should I care? So thank you for that, Lisa, and that introduction. Chris, can you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Chris Collins. I'm a vice president of sales and one of the owners of People to Go. We are a virtual technology service provider that has approximately 600 technology resources supporting our customers across Canada and the US on a daily basis.
Now, we've had a couple of conversations over the last year. When we first started talking to you, Chris, we talked about how you came into that role, into your leadership role, the intentionality that brought you to the awareness of where culture is going to fit. Then we met with you a few months ago, and we're kind of like midstream. And today we're going to get into just a little bit in a moment on the Culture Club, not the 1980s hit, but the Culture Club within your organization. But for those that don't know your story, can you take a moment and take us back through from when you first started the role as owner of the company, what brought you into the understanding that culture was going to be a substantial part of what you take on in your leadership role, and how that has morphed and evolved?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go a little further back than when I became an owner. I was the first employee of People to Go 22, almost 23 years ago now. So I went through the startup journey, and as we grew very intently, but we sort of did it we're flying by the seat of our pants. We never really defined the values of a workplace culture. So fast forwarded to about 2020, I became one of the owners after 19 plus years. And I developed a framework in partnership with my partners to focus on truly making People to Go a great place to work for the employees. I would I would state very unequivocally that our culture was very customer centric before. It was about whatever the customer needs, whatever they want, we bend over backwards to accommodate. And while I don't disagree with that, as a sales leader, my first objective is always to take care of our people, right? Focus on developing a very healthy and employee-centric workplace culture, focused on collaboration and transparency. And ultimately, the goal was never for my partners and I to lay down the overall vision of how our culture should go. It was to empower the people themselves, the incredible staff and employees we have at the company, to take control and take proactive initiative to enhance the employee experience and culture wherever they possibly can.
So, Chris, we talked like back in September, and we talked about that culture club, or that committee, and you talked about letting the people guide the culture. What was the evolution to that? Because I think if you go from like not being that employee centric workplace, and moving into that, how did that work? What was that evolution like?
It was very seamless for us because when we took over the business in March 2020, we had a plan that we implemented to focus on changing our culture first and foremost, and it was a pretty radical change. Fortunately, the people embraced the change very quickly, and we made a lot of decisions through a process of consensus and collaboration, the other C word that I like to use with respect to culture. So it was a fairly seamless transition. We were Great Place to Work certified the last two years in a row, which is not a vanity metric for us, but a reflection of the positive change that our people embraced, and not just embraced, but led the charge on to a great extent. Hence the reason why conceptualized the concept of the Culture Committee, which of course they call the Culture Club, giving me those 80s flashbacks. But it's been incredible how fast that matured. It's 100% volunteer based. It's got representation from every team in the organization. Some people come and go depending on workload or vacations and things of that nature. So we have constant contribution from different employees from different parts of the country and different departments within the organization that are working together very seamlessly to conceptualize different ways they can enhance employee culture and employee experience, employee morale, and employee productivity. And they've been very creative and innovative. But what made me really happy was not just that they took the bull by the horns and they led the charge on this. And I should mention that this is unhindered, meaning there is no intrusiveness from the ownership team. We have literally handed the keys to the car to our HR manager, who then formed the culture committee, or culture club, and we're letting them do their thing. They come to us, they don't ask for permission, they just do. And the impact has been very, very tangible. But I wasn't surprised by this, quite honestly. My personal belief is that people should have a significant influence in directing the employee experience and the culture. And perhaps in some cases, owners or the senior leadership team should step back, become a little bit more objective, and let the people do what's right. So for us, it's been an unmitigated success. But what they focused on in the very beginning was the philanthropic side of what we stand for. We have certain core values, one of which is giving back in different shapes and forms. And if we can't do that day in and day out to our friends, our family, our coworkers, our communities, and our country, then what are we doing? So they got very focused on charitable work, right? And supporting different charities across the country based on input from the staff members. Most of our staff members support different charities. A lot of people do. So it could be something in the small town in New Brunswick or something in the Okanagan, right? So they focused on that and dovetailed into a number of other creative initiatives to increase the level of engagement, increase the understanding of who everybody else in the organization is and what they do, because we are a virtual company. We may have been the first virtual technology service provider in Canada. Don't know that to be a fact, but a lot of the staff members have never met each other in person. It's been through video calls virtually. So it's been a complete success for us. And what's really impressive to me is they have no shortage of ideas. And as new people come in and want to be part of this, which is what's happening, word spreads very quickly that, hey, these guys are doing some really cool things, some really fun and magical things for the business. People really embrace that with open arms. And there's no expectation for people to do that, but they're doing it on their own time and making things happen.
So let me come in from the perspective of, when do, devil's advocate, let's call it that, right? When does the work get done? Sounds like it's just all fun and games all the time. When does the work get done?
Well, it doesn't detract them for their day-to-day responsibilities. We need to make this unintrusive because they'd be demotivated or de-incented to have to double down on their work and their workload if this was going to be a burden. So nobody's looking at this as a burden from what I've been told. And keep in mind, I don't participate in this committee or club at all. None of the owners do, right? And we can't, quite frankly. It's an investment. It's an investment of time in the people that work next to them, the people that work in the organization, and continuing to direct us on the path to be recognized as a top employer in Canada, as a celebration of the incredible change that our people embraced and helped facilitate.
So some of because what it sounds like to me is like this culture club is bringing the culture to life. So it's really bringing in some kind of tactical things where it's, again, more than those words on the wall, more than this is who we are, not a top-down approach, which I love, because there's going to be a culture in your company regardless of what the owners say. So it sounds like, right, that empowering them, giving them that autonomy to do that. But what sort of things are they doing? Because I'm going to assume that you and other owners and other senior leaders are getting involved in some of those tactical things that are happening to show your support of this culture.
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing we did, and we did this is where I worked with my partners, and I worked with them initially when we sort of set down the foundation, which wasn't much. We just said, here's what we want you guys to do. We're not going to be involved. You tell us when you need to be involved or if you need a budget for things, and we'll look at it that way. But we really collaborated on the vision itself, which was to, again, enhance employee experience. And by doing so, unsurprisingly, all metrics from an employment or even from a customer perspective have improved, including financials, so employee experience, employee productivity, employee morale, employee contribution. Retention is very high. Customer satisfaction and experience metrics improved. Financials, everything did. So they have come up with a very long list of ideas, and nothing is off the table. There's some really cool things they're doing to lighten the mood. Like, we're a serious organization, but we like to have a lot of fun. So people want to be in a place where it's not business 24/7. They want to be able to take a step back and relax a little bit. So they've got a number of team building events they're coming up with. They're doing a trivia day, I think every 2-3 weeks. Now we're going to be doing, I was not guess that line, but we're going to have like an 80s or 90s theme for music, and you're going to have 20 seconds to listen to the song and guess what that is. In fact, they've come up with action items for the owners to participate in, not because we asked them to, but because this is something for all the people in the company, not just of course, the staff members first and foremost, but we're part of that. And we have to embody the values of our workplace culture above and beyond. And we need to increase the level of engagement with our staff. We're not sitting in some ivory tower barking out orders, far from it. I believe, as I think I told you last time, I'm more of a decentralized level of decision making, where you let the people in the trenches make the decisions every day. And that's exactly what we're doing. Sorry if that was a long-winded answer, but
No, that's okay, because I like that. That's, I like where you bring it into you're making a level, more horizontal decision making platform for your people, getting into and you're talking to the converted here, right? Like that's a reality. But let's focus, as Lisa did, let's be a fly in the ointment for a moment and be the unconverted, the people that are just simply not willing to be consistent or intentional about what they're doing. Chris, what is the real data? What's the real return on investment that you're seeing in this project that is less than 5 years old, but showing great impact? You're measuring that data. What are your data points for measuring?
a lot of the data points we're measuring are coming from our Great Place to Work certification, because there are specific metrics that you must achieve to be even considered for that. And we have a consultant we work with that helps with us with that. So what we do is we analyze the metrics, all the objectives, we look at our benchmark data, and we set targets in a process of collaboration and consensus. I'm not a fan of making arbitrary decisions. So if we're going to let the people control the culture, which for me is the right way of doing things, maybe some will argue differently, then they need to be part of the not just setting the goals in the organization, but building a plan to achieve those goals. Right. And that includes a risk mitigation strategy as well. So most of the metrics are very favorable, but there are times where they're not as high as we were hoping for. So we immediately go through a process, our diligence process. Why? We start asking the proverbial why. And we're a very consultative organization, so it's not complicated to do. And in some cases, we're able to pinpoint that pretty quickly. But what's the most important thing for me is that everybody has a voice and they're using it. Before we took over, that was it was the polar opposite, quite frankly. It'd be like pulling teeth. So people feel comfortable, they feel very confident, they feel respected, they feel like they're making a measurable contribution, not just to the company. The company isn't anything without the people. They're making a measurable contribution to each other, and that's the most important thing. And by extension, perhaps by definition, to the company.
What are some of those data points? So it's a 2-point question here. What are some data points, and how do you react to them quickly and get on top of it? Is it a survey that you're doing right away? Is it phone calls? Like, can you give me an example of a data point, what you do with that?
Again, a lot of this is laid down through the metrics defined in the Great Place to Work certification. However, we have some of our own as well. We need to make sure that we're thinking a bit outside the box. So if we look at like metrics around employee experience, there's different, and yes, there are surveys, mostly anonymous surveys in most cases. But there is group consensus and discussions on this. In fact, just as a segue, every single team meeting in the organization starts with culture. Right? I think that was something I talked about before. So one way you had a positive impact culture since the last time we met, a week, 2 weeks ago, whatever it is. Now it's like breathing for everybody. So the contribution we're getting at an organizational level is better than ever. But we look at employee experience, we measure it in a couple of different ways. There is a very basic survey that goes out around that with the proverbial 1 to 10, 1 to 5, whatever the metric is. I see the metrics probably twice a year. Through our HR manager, who leads the charge on that, working with our consultant. But we didn't profess to think that we could do this all on our own. We knew that we had to bring someone from the outside in, someone like Natasha, who's really an expert in these things, help listen to what our vision is, and then help steer us in the right direction. But any metric that goes off the chart for whatever reason is something we react pretty quickly to. The most important thing is we do so without any preconceived notions or assumptions, which are always dangerous in my experience, and without any emotion. Right? That's the very big difference, because it used to be how dare they, how dare us not achieve this. Now it's about, there's a learning opportunity here. Let's listen. Right? And I think that has become foundational for who we are and what we do day in and day out.
I think Corey's reading my mind. You know, when employees need to feel they are seen, heard, and valued, that they are contributing. Otherwise, it will get very noisy within the employee base, and they'll start to question everything within their role, their pay, contributions, the value, and the list goes on and on. I had a recent experience, and I'm sure I'm not alone, with banks. And one of the things that I've noticed with the banks, and as you were talking about your linear leadership, Chris, and Lisa knows this one because I just recently complained to her about this, is the banks have taken the autonomy of making decisions, in my opinion, out of the branches. So if you have a banking question, you either need to be online or you need to phone. If sometimes you don't get the answer, sometimes nobody calls you back, sometimes you're on hold, sometimes they won't answer, and they'll direct you to the branch. So we go on over to the branch, and the branch goes, well, we have a dedicated phone for that. The customer experience, had they asked, which they don't, because they don't want to know, my customer feedback would be, why, 4 or 5 years ago, I could come into the branch and I could get the answers I need and the service I need in order to give you my money to hold for me. How are you measuring the customer experience? So and I'm really curious about how often you survey, because surveys, while they are effective, I have to say, as a customer, if I get survey after survey after survey from all of the points that I'm out using, I'm not answering most of them. So what are some creative ways that you're getting that customer feedback?
We have different types of surveys that go out. We have the sales team in particular, which reports to me, has constant conversations about how do we have an impartial way of measuring your customer experience. Like, we work with our customers in the true spirit of collaboration. We have our own thoughts on this, of course, but we want to make sure that we come to a very simple agreement on how this works. Now, we have some customers we can't do any surveys with because they just don't do them, and it's actually written into the master service agreements, but most of our customers do. And we take the data, the surveys, if they're done over the phone, which sometimes happens, more commonly through some virtual platform like SurveyMonkey or something else. And again, we always get the customers to commit to this process. It's not something that comes out of the woodwork, and it's very unintrusive. So everything's agreed to well in advance, and it's very simple. It takes 30 seconds in most cases to do. We analyze the data, we share that data, either in a quarterly business review or a scorecard. Right. And if the numbers aren't as high as we like them to be, we share our analysis on why, or we dig into it. And we generally have a very good understanding of the customer experience and the level of satisfaction they have with us. But if it drops for whatever reason, right, there's no humming and hawing here. We take immediate and responsible action, because the lifeblood of our organization, first and foremost, is our employees. But they're making a measurable contribution to the growth of our business every day through earning the trust and respect of our customers. So we're all sensitive to that. Once upon a time in this organization, it was just the sales team that was sensitive to it because they're the face and name of the relationship. But now everybody is, because it's a team effort to drive successful business outcomes for customers.
So interesting. And when you start to, try to line up the customer experience with the employee experience and how the culture kind of equates to all of that. I want to go back to kind of that leadership thing a little bit, because, you talked about you getting your orders, or the leadership gets their orders from the culture committee. It's a little bit like letting go. And like you said earlier, handing the car keys over. How hard is it to do that? And how hard is it to not try and grab those back when you're starting to get some lower results or not the numbers that you're expecting?
It was the easiest thing in the world because I had envisioned this before we took over. I sort of created a framework, which I presented to my partners on how I thought we should manage a business. And the advantage I have, and this is why I mentioned this in the preamble of the intros, is I've been here since day one, right? And I know where the skeletons are buried because I probably buried them. I knew what we did really well, and I knew where there was room for improvement. Now, I'm not saying I knew this categorically across the company, but I sort of positioned myself as, I'm there for everybody in all departments, and I talk to people pretty consistently. So for us, it's just part of the vision is that we did not want to interfere. We wanted the people to control and guide the culture. And in fact, when I laid down the vision of the culture committee, there was no agenda. There was no other mandate other than do whatever is necessary to enhance employee experience and culture. Make this not just a great place to work, a brilliant place to work, a fantastic place to work, right? Year over year. And we want to see consistent improvement as well. And we also want to be held accountable, meaning the owners. We want to be held accountable, or the senior leadership team, right? And we allow them to do that, right? If we're not doing all the right things to enhance that employee experience, we expect you guys to let us know. Fortunately, they haven't had to do that, but they know they can come to us. They're, 4 or 5 years ago, they would have been scared. They would have been nervous. And a lot of people wouldn't want to have been part of that conversation. Now, if an opportunity permits, we know they will, right? We're salt of the earth people too. So we're not sitting in our ivory towers taking 6 months of vacations in opulent places across the world. We're working in the trenches with our people day in and day out. So this isn't something they have to report back to us on because we see it and breathe it every single day.
I think that's an important distinction. I'm glad you said that because I think that breeds that respect. If you were sitting in your ivory tower, we can go back to Corey's comment there, where it's like, I'm not seeing fault, I'm just making money for these guys to go and drive their fancy cars and go on their fancy vacations. So I'm glad that you said that because I think that makes a big difference in trying to build a culture like you're talking about, because it's not going to work for everyone. What happens, and has it happened, because you obviously have like a really great workforce, but what happens when that bad apple comes in, because they're all out there? Have you seen that? Have you experienced that? I know, again, it's relatively new.
Yes. Well, we experienced this a lot for the first 18, 19 years of our existence. There was definitely some very challenging or poison pill personalities, as I like to call them. We had a very significant issue about 2.5 years ago. To be fair to that individual, there were life circumstances that were impacting that pretty substantially. And probably what should have happened in hindsight is that individual should have taken some time off. But there were certain circumstances that prevented that from happening. And there was a lot of constructive coaching done with that individual. One thing that really impressed me was once upon a time, this was, hey, someone has a complaint, they go up to the leadership and the leadership deals with the issue. So what we actually saw happen in that case, which I can probably count on 2 fingers how many times I'd seen happen before, was the people themselves were addressing the issue directly with the individual in a very respectful and professional manner. And there were a couple beefs that got sorted out pretty quickly. I heard about it after the fact and said, okay, great, there's nothing for me to do here. But unfortunately, the situation did get progressively worse. And again, the person was dealing with a really horrible situation on the family front that, that was filled with all sorts of emotion and extremely taxing. And we parted ways very agreeably that, okay, it's time for me to get a new outlook and sort of reimagine myself. But it was done the right way. And we haven't always done it the right way. There was no ripple effect, but both parties agreed it had to happen. And that's almost, in some perverse way, it's almost a nice feeling that it wasn't a bloodbath. We shook hands respectfully and parted ways just like that. And the disruption to the business overall was pretty minimal.
You're bringing to mind what I had said in the beginning. I did the presentation, and I see a value of employee assistance programs in those situations. Chris, how do you integrate the availability of resources and benefits to situations like that? Because even your best people, even your culture cub people are going to have those days where the cup's just too heavy to handle. And things fall off the rails. And so they are, they have the skill set and they have the attitude that you want on an ongoing basis, but you can see they're going downhill. how are those resources accessed to help your people that will also promote that culture?
So let me give you the answer that I know to be a fact, because I'm not as close to some of that as my HR manager is. But one thing we did is we used to have what's called a PIP. Everybody knows this, performance improvement plan. She said, let's call this an employee development plan, because the connotation of improvement will be perceived as negative. And language is very important. And this is something that I probably underestimated in the early days of really trying to not perfect, but craft the vision for the culture. So it was amazing to me the first time I had to administer an EDP, employee development plan, to an individual, how they responded to it. They were thankful. They were grateful. They were understanding. They were not defensive, right? There was little to no emotion. They knew that we were focused on their success and enabling them as much as we possibly can. So I think little things like that, which may not be a little thing in the grand scheme of things, but even the rewording and relabeling perhaps of that term, and even restructuring the plan itself, it was designed for not to punish or be punitive, but to set them up for success.
So you have a
Right?
real coach approach is what I'm hearing. You have a good coach approach. And, and I am putting you on the spot there because there are resources just like you're utilizing with measuring and tracking culture within your company. But what happens when your manager needs that assistance on how to best approach an emotional health situation, and that can have a detrimental impact on the culture as a whole, because we are more than just what we are at work, which is what you've outlined.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, that one of the biggest transitions I've seen with our leadership team in particular is how much more balanced the emotional intelligence is. Right? This was at times a fundamental challenge. I wouldn't say systemic, but with certain individuals in particular, and most of whom are in a leadership role. Again, emotions can cloud judgment, certainly affect your actions and behavior. So we did a lot of training organizationally on emotional intelligence, anger management, conflict resolution, a lot of things. And quite frankly, we didn't do much of this before. Right? Our focus has been investing in our greatest assets, which, all due respect to our customers, are not them, they're our people. So the training, the ongoing refresher training, and the emphasis we place on this has been great, but the change has been really radical. So when we see people making informed and calculated decisions now and focused on driving the right outcome, not just for the company, it starts with the outcome for the individual, for me, which will lead to a positive outcome in all likelihood for the company and our customers.
I want to kind of wrap this up, Chris, with you have a unique culture, right? Not every company is able to do this. So when you're hiring now, so when you're looking for new people to bring into the organization, what are the things that you're focusing on?
Great question. So we completely re-engineered this. One part of our business is technology staffing. So we interview, screen, qualify, interview, hire thousands of resources, not just for us, but more for our customers primarily. So what we did internally, having read thousands and thousands of job descriptions, is our job descriptions aren't just job descriptions. They tell a story. They tell a story about our company. They talk about our workplace culture, our values, and how we make value-based decisions. They talk about career progression plans. It lays out a vision for where this individual could potentially go, but doesn't limit them in any way, saying you can go in any direction your heart pursues. We're also, during our interview process, and this has changed pretty radically for us, most employers talk about their needs, their wants. We don't start that way. I want to know more about that individual's needs and wants. What are you looking for in a role? What are you looking for in a manager? What are you looking for in a team, in the company? Right? I get to know their wants, their needs, their must-haves more specifically, and see if it aligns with ours. So again, our job descriptions are a complete 180 from what they were 4 years ago. It tells a story. It's not just roles and responsibilities. Here's the qualifications. Off we go. We talk about our diversity, our inclusion. We talk about all the things that matter to the people, not just the company. And I think people find it quite refreshing that they go into an interview and they're not being peppered with questions right off the bat. But I will not interview anyone until I've heard their story, which I'm always fascinated by. We all have a story. And, really what makes them tick. What are they looking for? And the why is very important. That's critical because, again, if we're a consultative organization with a consultative mindset, then it's really understanding why does someone have a need in the first place? Why is that important to you? And does that align with our vision and our values? And the feedback we get from candidates when they interview internally for roles with people to go has been spectacular. It's much more collaborative, right? And focused on that job seeker experience, which is something we're very focused on in general with the recruitment side of our business anyways, right? They're not a commodity. People are not a commodity. They need to be treated with respect, and those relationships should be nurtured. So these are some of the ways that we have changed our mentality, and it's working very effectively for us. We get a lot more applicants to our roles. We're getting more women applying for roles than we ever did before, right? Because we are telling that story, right? And of course, there's always room for improvement, but we keep assessing, and we keep making incremental changes as we see fit. And when we say as we see fit, the people see fit to make a bigger and more measurable contribution and make this truly the best place to work. This is my ultimate goal. It's not to turn us into a $200 million company. Yeah, that's the sales vanity side. It's to do so by making this a fantastic place to work and allow everyone to make the best measurable contribution they can while maintaining work-life balance and having a positive impact on our culture. And I can't think of any one individual in this company that doesn't play a role in that in some shape or form.
That's amazing.
That's a great last word. Thank you for that. You know, I value that you take the time, Chris, to come in and talk to us about it. And like I said, you're talking to the converted, but it helps to spread the message, you know, one by one by one by one. I thank you so much for your time. Next week, I learned from everybody. Thanks so much for coming in today and sharing. It's always great conversation. Have a great week.